Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming to hang out tonight on Entropy Emporium. A couple of quick things before we. My name is Kian. I always forget to say that. A couple of quick things before we actually kick things off, and I have my God Killer introduce themselves. First and foremost, we are raising money for the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. Um, we don't need to say why this is important, but we will anyway. They're doing really important work on the ground. We all know how important that is to have people on the ground doing the work that is needed to help what is going on in Palestine. And so pay attention to the world around you. We ask that if you cannot donate, we totally understand. Just continue to talk about it, continue to raise awareness. The other thing, the second thing I should say, is that we have a Discord server. So if you like what we do, if you want to be involved in games that we put on, if you want to just show up and yell about how cool your friends are and how exciting you are and how excited you are to play really cool characters, come and hang out on our Discord server. That's really all that we do. We just vibe together. It's a lot of fun. Finally, wrong page. Still the wrong page. I've got so many tabs open, guys, and then I've got a 21-page document that I got to scroll through to get to where I need. Finally, for this game in particular, GODKILLER Desecration deals with mature topics which can include graphic depictions of violence, death, betrayal, gaslighting, sex with fade to black, religious themes, drowning, self sacrifice, manipulation, and mind control. It is super important to us that you take care of yourself and that you take care of your mental health. So, if at any time this game becomes too much, take a step back. We have our safety tools on our side that we are more than happy to use. We make sure that everything is good on our end, so make sure that everything is good on your end as well. With that, we can go ahead and jump into things. As I said at the top, my name is Kian. My pronouns are they, them. And I am playing the GM today, or God. I get to play all of the cool characters that my God Killer does not get to play. Everybody except my God Killer, the most important person. So I am super excited to be here tonight, episode 2. I'll hand it over to JD now for your introduction.
Thank you, Kian. I am thrilled to be back. I am JD, pronouns he, they, and I am playing our God Killer, Talon. Pronouns they, them, probably, honestly, any, all at the rate we're going, because I noticed some masculine pronouns last time and some feminine pronouns when I was thinking about tonight. So we're just going to probably say any, all.
I love it. Gender is not real, so definitely we support all of the different pronouns. So, last time we left off, our god killer had, as the title says, just killed a god. Had killed Ditlan, um, this god of reanimation, of bodies, of corpses, of things like that. This god who enjoyed, above all else, toying with mortal lives. This god who was not good. And when the time came down to it, instead of sparing them, you decided that he needed to die. And I think that that was an excellent choice because Ditlan was, again, a very, very awful character to play, but a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And trust me, that will not be the last that we hear of Ditlan, which is very cool and very exciting. We returned or bounced back and forth rather between the killing of Ditlan and a conversation with the god that Talon worships, Kolaris. Kolaris being the god of echoes. And we jumped back and forth because we opened at the very beginning with Talon tithing. I always say teething, with Talon tithing to Kolaris. At the very end of the episode, the conversation had continued with Kalaris, where he had inclined that he had something he needed Talon to do. And that is exactly where we left off, and that is exactly where we will begin. Talon, you are in this giant altar space with Kalaris, and this is the very first time that you have ever been in the same room with this god. Not the same room with a god, but with this particular one. This is the god that you have quote unquote worshipped for your entire existence, the god that you have always tithed to. Kalaris, as I had described before, is a humanoid with many arms and a head that is a star, many pointed star. And they've got this leering giant smile that remains no matter what they're saying, no matter what they're doing. This smile is always there. It's a little bit unnerving, a little bit unsettling as you're in this space. Arms for hugging, hands for holding. Exactly. Thank you, chat. That is exactly why Kalaris has so many arms. Um, Kalaris had said, I have a task for you, something I need for you to do, God Killer. You are the first of your kind, the first that could possibly ever do this for me. And let's say, and Kalaris continues, and that smile seems to get a little bit wider, a little bit gnarlier. Let's say that you're not interested in this, God Killer, that you have other plans for what you'll do with these new powers. That's quite alright, I suppose, but know that I can be very persuasive if needed. And as they approach, they seem to get bigger, their shoulders getting wider, their height getting taller, until they're kind of looming over you. And as you kind of take a step back, getting a little bit of space from this, two of those arms shoot down and latch onto the ground until they're literally prowling over you. That smile as wide as you've ever seen it, as wide as it could possibly be, and then with a snap, they slink back into that humanoid form. More normal sized, more normal shaped for as much as you can be for a god. So, God Killer, will you hear me out? Will you listen to what it is that I need for you to do?
Talon takes a moment, takes a breath, tries to steady themselves. That experience of Colaris leaning over them in that way, a little far too reminiscent of the recent experience with Dietlan. And if anything, outside of that flash of fear, that continued fear that they can't quite suppress, they more look confused, maybe even the slightest bit hurt as they say, "You didn't need to threaten me. You haven't even given me a chance to hear what you would be asking, but you are the god I worship. Why would I refuse you?"
Polaris, the smile gets wider and he starts to laugh a bit. Come now, you are mortal. Of course, there are times that you doubt. Of course, there are times where you must hate me and my existence for making you tithe as I do. Looks over at the knife that you have laid on the altar, this one embodiment of sentimentality, this most important thing right now, reminiscent of you killing Ditlan. Don't think I am stupid enough to not understand your doubt, mortal. And Ditlan's head stays focused on you as they walk over to the altar, pick up the knife, and sort of inspect it, gently place it back down. You've displayed a power that we have never seen before. Never once in the cradle has a mortal been able to kill a god. And you would know that gods can kill each other. That is not outside of the realm of possibility. In fact, the cradle is littered with the bodies of dead gods. But it's more of a rarity these days. It's not something that we see very often. It's not something that we expect. It seems like this pantheon of 12 gods that exist has gotten to a manageable size where they all kind of have their domain. They have the spaces that they worship. Sure, there is some fighting, there is some disagreements, but for the most part, they're able to coexist, and that involves a lot of distance oftentimes. Not always the case, but typically, gods find their own space, they get away from each other, they're able to exist within their own domain. Never before has a mortal killed a god, and yet here you stand before me with the blood of a god on your hands. When Kalaris says that, Talon, what are you thinking?
Talon's thoughts are jumping all over the place. They had a moment of thinking, how could doubt be a danger to a god? And in a lot of ways, that is a silly thing to wonder because doubt and lack of worship is certainly going to have an impact on the god that receives that power that comes from that. But that isn't where their mind stays. Their mind then goes to, well, you killed a god. So theoretically, you could be a threat to any god, including the one standing in front of you. But Talon very quickly dismisses that on so many levels, uh, most notably on the fact that he's pretty sure what happened with Dietlan was an accident, was an aberration. If he had not had the help that they had received, how would they have ever done that? And
Thinking
so
about
those are the thoughts that go through their head, and they are very concerned that any of this may be telegraphed on their face.
as you're thinking about this, as you've got this idea overall of doubting Colaris, of doubting gods, of doubting what happened with Dietlan. I know the answer to this, but I am curious. Whose voice do you hear as you're thinking all of this? Whose voice do your thoughts take?
You know, that is an interesting question because the answer to that does not come immediately to my head. I think as Talon thinks that, they feel like his own thoughts, like his own voice, but the pushback to that idea of doubt is definitely from Starling and everything that she has said over the years about the importance of tithing, how wonderful it is to be able to show your devotion in those ways to a god, to Colaris. And so his internal voice is focusing on these doubts, but in response, automatically, it's Starling that he hears.
Having this sort of conversation with your best friend, the person that arguably knows you best, despite some of the differences that you two have, I think that Colaris can sense that there's something that you're holding back. There's some sort of hesitation, and sort of turns their head a little bit toward you, seems to kind of shrug. What is hesitation? What is doubt? What is concern from a mortal to a god? That doesn't mean anything. And then continues. Something is happening that has not happened for thousands of years. It will be happening very soon, right here in the cradle. A new god will be born. This is not something that the cradle can handle. For understandable reasons, I think you'll agree. Our pantheon manages to sustain itself within its domains. There's not enough space for a new god. And you can start to see where Colaris is leading these thoughts. You can start to see this thread that he is beginning to tug on. I need you to end this god before it can walk. I need you to bring this god to its knees and remove its head and take its powers away, just as you did to Dietlan.
Talon can't hide their look of horror at this request isn't the right word, this demand of him. And forgetting his place, forgetting the power dynamics, Talon can't stop themselves from saying, but surely, Calaris, that isn't necessary. I mean, of course the cradle can handle one more god. We just had the death of Dietlon. There must be space. And if this god isn't like Dietlon, that how could that possibly be a concern?
You feel something that feels very similar to when Ditlon was around, when you were in the sunken temple. It's a crushing weight. Feels like it's going to bring you to your knees. It starts to drag on your shoulders and on your arms as Calaris gets closer to you and says, "You think I'm mistaken?"
No, of course I don't think you're mistaken, Colaris.
Then why do you doubt me?
I suppose it wasn't doubt as much as just confusion.
I've given you your orders, mortal. Go and kill this god. That's all you need to know. And that's all you need to do. Certainly, the experience with Dietlon has shown you what's one more god.
And it is clear that there are things that Talon wants to say, that he wants to argue, but he doesn't. He stays silent.
The weight lifts in your silence. And actually, where's my move sheet? I think that this counts, if you will agree, as the do as you're told move of
I think
sitting
so.
quietly, accepting what this god is ordering. When you do as you're told, say how you show submission and answer one. The GM will show you a glimpse of their true intentions as they answer the other. So, would you like to answer how are you rewarded, or what vulnerability do you reveal?
I think I will go with what vulnerability. And I think the vulnerability that is shown is that Talon is not willing to be fully subservient, that they are willing to question and push back, and that he may not be as controllable as it seems like he would be.
Perhaps, and Calaris begins to walk away, get space from you, as he had been getting closer to once again loom over you. Perhaps you need a bit of confidence. And they walk to the altar, and they grab the knife that you have offered, and they bring it back to you, drop it on the ground in front of you. That's yours, if you want to take it, if that's what you need to kill a god. I'll let you have this back.
And there is a moment of hesitation as Talon thinks about the fact that they didn't use this knife to kill Dietlon, that this wasn't the source of the power, but they also see what is being offered. An item that they have just tithed has been handed back. And they're not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, so they take it and, clasping it in their hands, keep their head bowed and say, "Thank you."
I'll reward those that do as I wish, follow orders when they're given. There could be more waiting for you when you come back. If you come back successfully, or at all. Perhaps with Ditlan it was a simple rarity, a one off, if you will. Perhaps this new god will eat you alive. It would be a pity. But if you do come back, and you've done what I say, perhaps you'll even come back to your friends still alive, and an image of Starling flashes in your mind. Well and thriving, I do know how important they are to you.
And Talon absolutely grasps the more than implied threat. And even though any slight confidence they may have gotten from picking up the knife has been immediately decimated by Colaris expressing the doubt in Talon's ability to follow through on the task he has been given. It is very clear to them in this moment that they cannot turn back, because if they do, it's not only themselves in jeopardy. And they may not have many people they care about, but they do care about the people they have in their life.
Make your way to the first cradle, the place where all gods are born. Get there soon enough, and you'll be there before this god comes into creation. We are, whether or not you know this, at our most vulnerable before we can walk. Kill the god then, and you shouldn't have too much trouble. Do you understand?
I understand that it sounds as though you are telling me to kill an infant.
An infant, perhaps, by our standards. A god still to you. Do you have any questions?
Do you know what they will be the god of?
And Colaris, the smile never falters, but you can see almost that he's gnashing his teeth. We never know, he says through bitten teeth. Not until we walk. I expect, whatever it is, that their domain will challenge mine, and I cannot have that. And it is not. Let me make sure there's not a move for this. I think let's use fill someone or something out. When you try to feel out a person, place, or thing, say what you want clarity about and answer one. The GM will give you the clarity you seek as they answer the other. I will gift you that the clarity is a bit of an insight into Colaris in this moment that perhaps you wouldn't be able to glean any other moment than this. Would you like to answer what feels welcoming on the surface, or what feels dark or unnerving when I peer deeper?
I think I'll go with what feels dark or unnerving when I peer deeper. And of course, if this does not fit with what you have been building with Colaris, let me know. But based on what Colaris has said, I think what feels dark or unnerving is the need for power that Talon is seeing beneath the surface. That Colaris perhaps slipped when he said that this god will be intruding on his domain. That there's not enough space in the cradle, but there's not space in this domain. And that Colaris is willing to do whatever is necessary to ensure that their power is not threatened.
I think that is absolutely accurate. Kalaris is a very greedy god, a very hungry god. Um, in a way that's different from your experience with Dietlan. Dietlan seemed, well, while he was consuming all things, while he was that amalgamation of flesh and of bone and of body, the hunger there was not quite as deep, it seems, when it comes to Kalaris. I will say what feels welcoming on the surface is this moment, this one instance where it seems like Kalaris might be afraid. And you've never seen a god be fearful. You've never heard of a god being fearful. But it's not anger. It's not any other emotion that you can name. It looks like fear. And if a god can feel fear, then that is a power that a mortal can have over them. And so it feels welcoming in this moment that perhaps the tables have turned a little bit, that perhaps there is a bit of power that you have. And then Colaris repeats, "Do you have any questions?"
No, I have no questions at all. You have given me my orders and I understand them and I will fulfill them to the best of my ability.
To the best of your ability had better be success. Now get out of my sight. And you feel that weight once again come over you to where, as you're leaving this temple, you are having to fight to take each step because your body feels like it's made of lead. And the second that you get out of the temple and the door shut behind you, it's a little bit lighter. You can breathe a little bit easier. You're able to walk as normal. You're able to exist once again in this space without that weight looming over you. Where do you go? What do you do?
There is a moment as Talon leaves where he just wants to lean back against the temple doors and close his eyes and take a breath and take a minute. But I would imagine as soon as they step out, they are hearing the sound of voices again, that there are plenty of people there to witness him do that. And so instead of staying, they make their way, walking as steadily as possible, head up, eyes straight ahead, trying to project some level of confidence and competence. And they are going to head straight to where they live in the hopes of being able to take a moment in a space that is familiar and no one else, theoretically, is around.
It's surprising a bit because you do hear voices immediately as you walk out. People are chanting, "God killer, most devout, servant of Kalaris." Nobody approaches you. While people are in awe, there seems to be, whether it's reverence, whether it's uncertainty, whether it's fear, people want to keep their distance. So it's easy enough to walk through the crowds, even as people are chanting. And the chanting gets quieter the farther you get from the temple. You pass by the market where people are mostly just stopping to stare, and they smile if you catch their eye, and they nod. Somebody whispers thank you as they walk past. You walk past the library where even fewer people seem to be paying you notice. So by the time you make it home, you've made it home in peace and in one piece. And that is a remarkable thing, given that you've just walked through an entire city that wants to worship the ground that you walk on. What is Talon's home look like?
Talon's home is small. It is currently only for him. It never actually was a place that was shared with his parents. After their death, they had to find other places to be. And so it honestly looks like a shack, and it is well maintained, but it might as well be. It has enough space for one room, which has everything: a place to sleep, a place to cook, and it has just a very, very small garden. And the garden contains nothing but the herbs the Talon uses to cook. But it is his, and it is away from others, which he is even more grateful for as he pushes open the door and does not have to worry that people will be just walking past this place on their way to do other things because it is far enough out of the way.
You have made this tucked away spot into your home, and it is a quiet corner of peace. And there is no one else there. Nobody waiting at your door to speak with you, nobody walking past, as you said. It is very quiet, it's very peaceful. And then you shut the door, and for some reason, shutting that door, you seem almost teleported back into the sunken temple. You shut the door, and suddenly everything in front of you seems like it's made of flesh. And there stands Dietlan, except he's not quite the amalgamation that you saw before. He's much more. He looks like a human, except every once in a while, part of his body will ripple, like there's something trying to climb out of it, like there's something trying to claw its way through. And he kind of just shakes his head and it sinks back in. And he smiles at you with a face that looks almost morbidly human. It's terrifying in its mundanity because you've seen what he can become. And all of a sudden, he is just a guy, just a dude standing there in front of you. And he smiles. Are you afraid, Godkiller?
How why are you you're dead. You can't be here.
And yet here I stand. Are you afraid?
Yes. Obviously. Yes. What kind of
Good.
a question is that?
You should be afraid. And he smiles and snaps his fingers, and you're back home. And it is jarring and it is sudden, but at least it's away from him. You take your moment to breathe. You reorient yourself, you reset yourself. What does Talon do when the world feels overwhelming? What is something that they would do to ground themselves?
Well, this wouldn't be what he would normally do. He does run his hands along the walls, making sure that they do not feel like flesh, that their hand does not just sink in the way it did at the temple. And that is the first thing he does to ensure that everything is as it should be. Once he has established that, there's a moment where they think about walking over to take Sunshine out of their cage, and he can't bring himself to do that yet. I think what ultimately they end up doing is going to shower to wash themselves off because they can still feel that sensation of the flesh sucking them into that wall. And They just want a moment to do something that feels normal and comforting and takes that sensation away.
While you mentioned sunshine, um, we haven't been able to be introduced to sunshine quite yet. Can you describe what your falcon looks like?
Sunshine is a peregrine falcon, but does not have the usual markings. The markings on Sunshine are a little bit different, a little bit off, and I think they have been ever since Talon was initially bonded with them. Um, they share the same amber eyes that Talon now has. And there are a number of markings on the wings that almost look like symbols, but maybe that's just how the feathers fall in varying colors of gold and red and amber on an otherwise black coat.
This beautiful falcon, one of a kind, truly a rarity, is sitting in its cage, blinks at you. What pronouns would you use for sunshine?
I've been defaulting to they them, but
Okay.
we'll stick with that, or we'll throw them all over the place.
I was gonna say we can explore. We can see what that looks like. Um, they blink at you, and as you walk by, it almost looks like they nod their head. You, your entire life has been spent tithing to Kalaris, but they are not the only god, the only domain that you've interacted with. There is another domain. Granted, you interacted with it from Angelfell, from the city that you live in, so not quite close to where they actually exist. But there is another god whose domain you're familiar with. And when Sunshine nods at you, it's it's almost like those amber eyes take on a different life, take on a different expression. And it's an expression of acknowledgement, and it feels a bit comforting in this moment. There is this familiarity that you have, and then Sunshine blinks, and they are just your falcon, and they don't look like any other kind of entity. But you go and you shower, try to wipe off that feeling of being absorbed into the wall in the sunken temple. And you are sort of recentering yourself when you hear a knock at the door.
And I imagine in that moment, Talon is in the process of drying off their hair, which at this point is hanging loose and falling around their shoulders and looking not unlike the hair of their mother, who they so recently saw. They do pause to put some, I think it would be the equivalent of birdseed in front of Sunshine. And whether that is to acknowledge the eyes that they saw peering out for a moment and a tithe in and of itself, or at least acknowledgement, or just to feed Sunshine, even if this is not Sunshine's preferred food. Either way, they do take a moment to do that before very, very warily going to open the door, hoping that they can predict who is standing on the other side.
You open the door, and immediately there is strawberry blonde hair filling your vision, rushing toward you, throwing their arms open as Starling. They go to hug you, they pause, they stop, they put their arms back at their sides, and they kind of blink and they look a little bit teary eyed as she says, I'm sorry, can I give you a hug?
Talon is already moving forward to give them a hug. She is not hesitating at all. This is her friend, and she had a moment where she didn't think she would ever see her again.
Starling wraps their arms around you and squeezes tight, and it is like settling in your bones, feeling Starling hug you back. And Starling continues to squeeze, almost like holding you there. Because similarly, there was times when Starling thought, I'm never going to see my friend again. I have sent them to their death. And finally lets you go, holds you at arm's length, hands on your shoulders. I can't believe you did it. I can't believe you actually did it. I thought you were just going to talk. I didn't think you were actually going to try and kill him.
I mean that was the plan, Starling. I didn't go there to kill him. I didn't expect to kill him, but he wasn't there to talk.
I'm sorry I sent you. I should have gone. I should have been the one to go. I just How did you do it?
Okay, first off, it wasn't your fault, Starling. I was willing to do this. I was willing to go with you, and when the time came, it was my fault that we were in this situation. So I don't blame you, and I don't want you to blame yourself. But as for how I did it, I don't know. I didn't think I could. I wasn't even trying to. I was just I was so angry and I didn't want to die.
And then you came back and you spent so much time in the temple, more time than you've ever spent in the temple. Were you just were you tithing? Were you praying?
And it's at that moment where Talon had, of course, felt the enormity of being in the presence of a god. They had felt the god's power, not only from Dietlon, but from Colaris as well. And it's when Starling says that he realizes fully for the first moment, I just met the god that I have spent my life tithing to. This incredibly powerful being that almost no one, or actually no one, has ever seen face to face. I did that. I saw that, and it it makes his knees weak for a moment, and he goes to sit on the edge of his bed. No, I was talking to Colaris.
So you were praying.
No, I was talking to Colaris.
What do you mean you were talking to Colaris?
He a- appeared to me like a person, but not like a person. I mean, obviously, he's a god, so. But he was there in the room, talking to me, speaking to me, asking me about what had happened.
I and it's interesting because there is doubt for a moment, and then there is relief, and then something that almost looks like jealousy, something that looks envious. And I know those two words are not the same thing, but I never remember which one I want to use. But there is a brief moment of just confusion and It doesn't quite get to anger. I don't know that Starling could ever be angry at you before Starling says, "You actually saw him. You met with him. He's what was he like?" And Starling, almost without even noticing, kneels. So much as even talking about Kalaris can bring Starling to her knees because they are that devoted. They revere Kalaris so much. It paints a very interesting picture that Starling is asking, what does this God, who they have also tithed to their entire life, what is my God like while they are looking up at you?
And Talon doesn't pause for that long audibly, but she is going through all of the words that Kolaris said when they were together. They are thinking about the words, especially that painted the god's impression of Starling. And there are so many other pieces that Talon is sifting through, because as much as he and Starling have talked about faith and doubt and all of that, he cannot bring himself to be the reason that Starling's perspective on the god that they have worshipped their entire life changes. And so what Talon says is, Kalaris was generous, and reaches into his pocket and takes out the knife. Kalaris granted me my tithe returned so that I may have this to continue to do good work in his name.
There are tears in Starling's eyes. This is everything that he could have hoped for. Everything that he's ever wanted to hear about his god. That's amazing. I can't believe. Do you think he would do that for anyone else?
And Talon says, I don't think that's for me to answer, but I would hope that he would. I would hope that he would honor anyone devout and committed to worshiping him and protecting Angelfell in the same way.
Of course. Of course he would. He and Starling stop short as there is another knock on the door. And it is a heavy, slow knock. And I think before you go to answer it, that is an excellent time for us to take a brief break. So sit tight, everybody, or go stretch your legs, pet your pets, take your meds, drink, eat a food, all of the things that you can do in the next 10 minutes or so, and we will be back very shortly. Uh... And we're back. Hello again, everybody. Um, so last we had left off, there was a heavy knock on the door. Very heavy, very slow. What do you do?
The first thing Talon does is extend his hand to Starling, since Starling is kneeling, and he wants to make sure that when this person, whoever is on the other side of the door, does not see that image of Starling kneeling in Talon's direction, even though, Talon is pretty sure that the only reason Starling is kneeling is because of her devotion to Colaris. Still, that would be weird and not something that they want to be spread around the town. So they extend their hand to Starling to get them to their feet, and then go and check to see who is on the other side of the door.
Starling takes you up on it, is kind of wiping their eyes, um, turns and is also watching the door. And you open it to what looks at first just like an elderly man. Um, but this is somebody that you recognize, and you know that this is no ordinary person. This person's name is Eden. And Eden used to be someone who mocked Colaris, who mocked the tithing process, who was very prideful of never tithing. And one day Eden showed up dead. And now is puppeted by Colaris from a distance to go and collect tithes. And this has been going on for quite some time. So Eden is a very common sight, unnerving as it may be to see him. He is standing before you and he kind of groans a little bit and then just holds out a basket. And you can see that this basket is filled with trinkets. You assume or know this is him asking for a tithe. Um, Sometimes you give and sometimes you don't, because as a worshiper of Colaris, you know sometimes there is simply nothing to give in that moment. But Eden holds out the basket, and Starling almost rushes past you and looks at her hands, eventually takes one of their rings off, drops it into the basket. Starling has never let Eden pass without tithing. Many of Starling's tithes have been because Eden is walking by. Um, and then Eden turns to you and holds out the basket. Do you give him anything?
There's a moment where Talon is essentially frozen because, well, Eden has become this common sight. There is something far too reminiscent about the ways in which Deetlon would puppet those who had died, or those who were living and were being used in the horrible ways that Talon witnessed. And I I imagine that there had been a level of discomfort, and that it tied in some with Talon's doubt to see the way someone who had had their own doubts was treated. But it feels so much different this time, to where even if Talon was thinking about what they would tithe, they wouldn't be able to move. And that look of horror is fully telegraphed on his face.
Starling turns to you and starts to ask, do you have anything to tithe? And sees the look on your face and turns back to Eden and very gently says, that's all, Eden. You can continue on. And Eden's head nods very forcefully, as though somebody were pushing it from behind, pushing his head down. And he turns and stumbles out the door. And truly, the way he moves, it looks like a puppet on strings. His joints lift and his hands hang there next to him. He's holding the basket still as he stumbles his way down to the next house to go and knock on the door and ask for more tithes for Colaris. And Starling turns back to you. Are you okay?
And Talon nods and she tries to be mindful of her words, but isn't sure that she succeeds as she says, "Yes, I'm fine. I just it reminded me for a moment of what I saw Dietland do. And I know it's completely different, but it reminded me of that. But this is Colaris, this isn't Dietland, so it just took me a moment to realize."
Starling looks a bit taken aback by what you said and slowly nods, their brow furrowed. Of course, I can only imagine how shocking that might be. The awful things that Dietland was doing to his followers. I'm sorry that Eden startled you like that, but like you said, it's very different. Colaris decreed this, of course, and part of you starts to think about that Colaris decreed this. And it kind of makes you wonder if Colaris decreed that Eden go around and collect tithes, Colaris must have also decreed that Eden die. And it makes you start to question who would carry out something like that. Who would kill somebody simply for refusing to tithe? Does Talon have any suspicions on who that might have been?
I think Talon wonders, but doesn't necessarily settle on any specific person.
There are a lot of followers of Colaris, um, and really, it could have been anybody in the city. It rings a little bit different, given that you have now also been given orders by Colaris. But nonetheless, Eden has been sent on his way to continue to collect tithes. And Starling looks at you and says, "You're pretty well famous in the city now. Um, I know that that's probably not anything that you're interested in, but a lot of people are really fascinated and really curious to hear what happened and how it happened. And of course, we're grateful because you took out somebody who," and Eden kind of stops and stumbles, and because taking out somebody is a weird way to say you killed a god. You you ended someone who was tormenting us. So a lot of people are really grateful, but is there anything I can do to help? I know that all of this attention is probably not comfortable for you.
And Talon considers that maybe maybe it would help if I told you what happened, Starling, and you could share that with others. As it turns out, Colaris would like me to do some traveling on his behalf, and so I will be away from Angelfell for however long that takes me.
You're going to spread his word. That's amazing that you've been asked to do that.
Yes, it is. Who would have thought that I would have ever been asked to do something like that?
Well, Robin did say, and she is his most devout, but she did say, you have to be special to Colaris now. Special in a way that none of us could ever hope to be.
And Talon is reminded in that moment of the fact that Colaris did call them most devout, but they are not going to say those words out loud.
Where will you travel to?
Well, if I am honest, I'm not entirely certain of exactly where I will go. I imagine I will go where Colaris needs me to.
Of course, that makes sense. And of course, I'll tell everybody what happened if that's helpful for you. I would be honored to spread the word and make sure that people understand exactly what you've done for us.
I appreciate that, Starling, and my my hope is by the time I return, hopefully that story has spread and people are satisfied with that and may have less questions for me.
I don't know if that could ever happen, but I'll do my best. And Starling would listen to you tell the tale. Do you tell it honestly? And do you give them all of the details of what happened?
For the most part, yes. Talon does not share with her the fact that he had outside help. That is not a piece that is mentioned. There is no mention either on any real acknowledgement that the mask could have been sort of a seat of power, that it's more presented as I had no idea this would happen, and then I punched the mask, and somehow that resulted in the death. And that piece, she catches herself omitting those details and can't quite figure out what it is about that they are so uneasy to share with Starling. But somehow that feels wrong. It feels a lot safer to present this as though it were just an accident, that Talon has no idea how this happened.
When you do you tell Starling about your mother?
Yes.
Whenever you tell that part of the story, you can see that Starling kind of holds himself back, wants to ask questions. Um, Everyone has lost someone to Deetlon, including Starling, and of course would want to know who else you saw, but Starling holds back, seeing your expression, hearing your words, understanding this is not something to be relived for a long moment, and nods and almost looks like she's taking notes, kind of memorizing everything and really committing it to memory. Um, I'll I'll tell everyone. I'll leave out the part about your mom. I don't think people need to know that, but it must have hurt. But I'll tell them everything else, and I'll tell them that it was a gift of Kalaris that you were able to do that.
Talon accepts that with a nod. Thanks, Starling, for not sharing the piece about their mother, and does not dispute the presentation of it being a gift from Colaris. He does pick up though on Starling holding himself back from asking those questions and does offer what little they can and say, I did not see anyone that you had lost, Starling. I have no doubt they were there, but I think the important thing is knowing that all of those who were lost are free now. They are not under Dietlon's control and they can rest quietly. I only wish there had been a way to bring them all back and give them a proper burial, but at least we know where they lie and we know that they are not being misused in those horrific ways.
And Starling looks down, obviously not excited by what you've said, but conflicted because, like you said, this is a good thing. And of course, of course, you're right. I'm glad that everyone is back to resting. It's what they needed. I've held you long enough. I know that you need to get ready for wherever it is that Kolaris is sending you, but I hope you'll come back soon, or at least come back and visit. I'm gonna miss you while you're gone.
I'll miss you too, Starling, and I I hope it will not keep me away from Angelfell for too long.
And Starling nods, says her goodbyes, and is very intentional about making it not sound final, and will, unless you stop them for anything, will see themselves out the door.
Talon does not stop them. He just tries not to think about the fact that it feels once again very reminiscent of the moments they had right before they walked out to the sunken temple. And they are trying very hard to keep Kolaris's words out of their mind. The fact that this could be something that they do not return from.
You have more quiet moments. You're able to take a breather and really rest. How quickly are you heading out on this mission?
Within, we will say, perhaps 12 to 16 hours. Talon wants to rest physically and mentally before that happens, but they were not given a time limit aside from Polaris's words that this needs to happen before the new god can walk. And he's not sure how long this will take, so better to begin the journey sooner and not run the risk of displeasing Colaris or not having the chance that is needed.
You take the time to rest, take a breather, live a very normal as you can, 12 to 16 hours, because you have no idea what the road ahead is going to bring you. Before getting ready to set out, we'll say about midday next day, you the path to the first cradle leads you through several cities. So you have a couple of different paths that you can take. So you get to kind of think about, we'll kind of walk through what those look like. Um how are you going to get there?
Well, Talon does have a motorcycle, and that can take him where he needs to go.
Absolutely. And are you bringing Sunshine with you?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes, Sunshine is not going to be left for the duration of this journey.
Okay. So you and Sunshine head out. Um, the routes that this would take you would technically lead you through three major cities, but you can avoid one of them if you would like. This would be the city under the bridge being what connects Angelfell to the Mirrored City. You will have to pass through the Mirrored City and through Noth in order to get to the first cradle. but you can avoid the city under the bridge if you would like. Um, the benefits of going through the city under the bridge is that you might find information, you might get to know a little bit about where you're headed, see if there's any sort of rumors going around about this first god. Um, the benefits of avoiding it is that the city under the bridge is a bit lawless and is considered outside of the domain of pretty much every god. There is one, Musin, who tends to be considered the deity that oversees the city under the bridge, but is by no means not a merciful, not a friendly, not a kind god. So it can be dangerous going through the city. What path would you like to take?
Oh, I mean, I think we're going to the city under the bridge. Yeah,
Okay,
that is
fair enough.
absolutely happening.
Fair enough. You are leaving Angel Fell, this city that is built into the cliff faces. You're leaving on the other side of the city, and you have a path. It's very direct. One path leads you straight on, the other path dips down and goes into the city under the bridge. Um, the city spans the entire length of the bridge itself. This is a massive city because the mirrored city is not close by any means. You head into the city, and when you first arrive, you seem to blend in pretty well. There's not a lot of heads turning your way, there's not a lot of people whispering as you go by. There are other people on motorcycles, there are other people dressed in similarly muted clothes, and the city is a very transient place, so it's not uncommon to see strangers here. In Angelfell, had you seen a new face, it would have been through the grapevine in a matter of hours because everyone knows everyone in Angelfell. But here, you can be kind of just a face in the crowd. There are plenty of different places to explore. Angelfell is not a holy city, but is considered one of the nicer places. In the city under the bridge, it's grimy, it's dirty, there are establishments there that you would not find in Angel Fell, and you've never explored outside of your hometown. You've never been somewhere new. So this is crashing into you like a neon sign. It is wild out here. You see plenty of bars, you see brothels, you see people wandering the streets, you see back alleys, you see dark corners. Everywhere that Angel Fell is truly not. It feels very much different from the place that you have grown up in. How do you feel about being here?
There is such a mixture of emotions because the fact that it is so unfamiliar is intimidating. The fact that Talon can be just a face in the crowd makes it a little less intimidating because they can kind of observe from a distance and get a sense for what is happening here and how different this is. But there's a level of excitement of, oh, this is new, this is different. People are just going out to the bar, people are just hitting up the brothels, like people are just existing in this space in such a different way than the people exist in Angelfell.
You are the farther that you get into the city, you see people living very freely. Um, it's a very just overstimulating place, I guess is the best way to put it. There is so much going on. Everywhere that you look, there is something new to see. Eventually, you end up at this strip of bars where there are plenty of people walking around each other and kind of there's dancing going on. People are dancing in the streets, people are drinking. Some people just seem to be stopping and watching, and people watching and observing and taking everything in. Um, but it seems a good a place as any to kind of stop. I would say it's pretty close to dinner time now, so you're probably getting a little bit hungry. This is kind of seems to be there's restaurants around, things like that. What what kind of place is Talon drawn to? Where is she headed that feels not necessarily the most comfortable, but at least is curious enough to explore?
Definitely one of the less crowded ones, not like empty. So, not just kind of somewhere where she can sit and, it'll be very visible that she is there. But also not somewhere where it's like bodies, packed shoulder to shoulder. Somewhere in the middle where they can kind of get a little bit lost in the crowd still, but not in an overwhelming way. I think if there is anywhere, and it sounds like there is, with music, that he would be drawn especially to that.
There's absolutely live music going on, a range of it as well. Excuse me. There are places where it seems a little bit quieter, like somebody is just, sort of going with an acoustic guitar, enjoying some quieter music. There are places that are ragers. There are rock shows going on. You hear hip hop music. And again, all of this is very new. Even the level of general excitement for existence is something that is new to you. People, not that people will show their ungratefulness, and a lot of people don't feel ungratefulness for living in Angelfell, but it's more resigned. It's more the acceptance of this is just the way we've always lived, and this is the way we will always live. And maybe we aren't necessarily the most satisfied with it, but we're not going to take the time to try and change it. That is not the case here. Or if that is the case, people are not just sitting by and letting life pass them by. They are here to live life to the fullest. You would know that Musin is the god of destruction. This is not necessarily the safest place, even as lively as it is, as excited as people are. But you absolutely can find a place with some music playing pretty well, medium packed. It's not super slammed, but there are enough people that you can kind of just fade into the crowd. You have to go and order up at the bar to kind of, so you go up and you grab the barkeep's attention, order kind of the local fare. Is it's a bit greasy, it's a bit heavy, it's not nearly as fresh as what you're used to, especially having your own garden and being able to cook your own food. So this is not necessarily ideal, but it is edible and it is quite good whenever you try it. Um, People are very invested in cooking and making sure that people are enjoying their meals no matter where you are, it seems. Even in the city under the bridge, people want to make sure that you are enjoying your food. As you are sitting there, listening in to people talking, you start to hear people whispering about a god. And you don't know at first if this is about Musin or about a different god. But then you start to hear people talking about a new god, the birth of a god. Not only do you hear people whispering, "Have you heard? I can't believe that this is happening," but you also hear people talking about following this god. This is the first time that a new god has ever been born. We can curry favor with him. We might be able to worship her before anybody else can. Perhaps we can be the most devout for them. It is very interesting that people are already talking about following this unborn god. Unborn, unmade, as it were. These words are being passed not necessarily discreetly, but it's clear that this is not meant to be open conversation. Do you try and interact with anybody? Do you try and engage with anyone?
Talon sticks more to just listening in, and if it seems kind of like one conversation is either like sparking its way across the space, they'll try to sort of follow it, whether it is going up for another drink and then kind of leaning into where this conversation has moved to. But I don't think she asks any questions directly because it's also very unsettling to him that people are talking this openly because he's pretty sure if you talked like this and Kolaris heard, it would not go well. So there's this thought in the back of their head of, are these, those who are devout to Musin, are these people who are passing through? And if they are devout, how dangerous is it to be speaking like this in the domain of a god of anger, no less?
You are absolutely right to be cautious about this. A quick question. Is Sunshine with you, or is Sunshine somewhere safe? Or have you sent them off somewhere?
I think Sunshine has been sent off. I think Sunshine was with Talon when Talon was eating because Talon shared some of their food with Sunshine as much as Sunshine was willing to like peck at meat that is different and differently prepared than anything in Angel Fell or anything that Talon would have given them. But I think after that, just with it being so full of people and with the uncertainty and unpredictability, he would have sent Sunshine to like perch on a nearby roof.
I will say that Sunshine was garnering more looks than anything else. People did definitely take notice of this peregrine falcon, um, who seems very
Just eating
well
from my plate.
behaved. Yep.
Just casual
people
things.
were people were definitely like, what the fuck is going on? Nobody interacted, nobody questioned it, but everybody was certainly looking and glancing in that direction. You have sent Sunshine off. You're sitting and listening to people talking about this when you start to hear a bit of a commotion behind you, and you hear it getting louder and louder. And you glance over, and it looks like two people are shouting at each other. And somebody takes the first swing, and it is chaos. Outside of the engagement with Dilan, I don't know that Talon has ever seen a fight break out like this. Or in general. It's not common in Angel Fell that people are just swinging blindly on each other. Somebody takes the first swing, the other person swings back. It is absolute chaos. People are giving them space, but more space than necessary. They seem to be backing up and giving them a very wide berth. What are you doing as this is happening?
Talon is first of all paying attention to what others are doing and trying to follow that. And I think seeing that these two who are fighting are being given such a wide berth, their thought is, this must just be the custom. Like when people fight, you stand back and you let it happen and you watch. And he guesses he's going to do that because apparently that's what's done. So they're keeping an eye on how much the fight is escalating and also what the rest of the crowd is doing in response to this.
The You clock this probably before anybody else does because you know what feathers sound like. You're so used to hearing it, especially when it comes to Sunshine. You clock the sound of feathers as something bursts through the wall of this bar. Something large with lots of feathers in blacks and whites and reds. This creature, I imagine that Talon is pretty familiar with different kinds of birds.
I think so.
I
Yeah.
would That feels very fair. Um, you would recognize a vulture. They are not very common in Angelfell, but you would just recognize one. You've probably seen pictures in the library. Not necessarily perhaps this particular kind of vulture, but in general, scavengers you're used to seeing. This bearded vulture, with its red chest and red crown, swoops in and, with talons bigger than anything you've ever seen, grabs both of these people fighting. And there is a sickening crunch as the talons break through bone and break through flesh. There is. It is shocking that nobody moves as this vulture begins to devour both of these people right in front of you. It begins rendering limb from limb, ripping these people apart, going straight for the bones, chewing up as much as it can. And everybody just watches. Everyone stands there, still as stone, and watches. I would like you to take the move, recognize a god. When you want to
Yep.
recognize the signs or influence of a god in the cradle, roll 2d6, add 1 for each true statement. You're in or near their domain. Absolutely, you are. So we'll add +1 for that. You're familiar with their gospel. I don't think so.
No, I think that is a definite no.
It'd be bad if you didn't know. I think in this moment, the answer is yes. I think it's important that you know who this god is and what their domain is like. So add +2. Roll 2d6 and add +2.
Ah, this is. I really need to stop using these dice because they've been rolling really well, which I keep forgetting in this game is not an optimal outcome. Because that is an 11. That was 6, a 3 plus a 2.
Delightful. This is so good. This makes me so happy. On an overkill, a 10 plus, you realize your divinity is actively trespassing against them right now. Everyone is standing still as stone. There is not a drop of emotion in this room as this creature is tearing these people apart. And then Musin, the god of destruction, looks up right at you. And this creature stands, tucks its wings in, takes one step toward you, takes another, and another. What are you doing?
Talon is instinctively trying to back up, though I'm not sure the people around them will let that happen because they are definitely just bumping into anyone who is there.
Nobody wants to catch the ire of the god of anger. That is a terrifying thing. You This thing gets closer and closer to you. People start to give it a wide berth, start to give you a wide berth because they're realizing, wait a second, this god is focused in on one person. It's got nothing to do with me. I'm just going to get the fuck out of the way. So these people start separating from you as you're backing up. So eventually you do have enough space to be able to continue to back up. Are you where are you Where are you headed? What are you doing? How do you see this playing out in your best instance?
There is the briefest flash in Talon's mind of thinking about moments with Colaris, moments with Dietlan, where he thinks, show subservience, kneel. But that's easier said than done when a god is advancing on you in this way. And I think in that moment, they give into their fear and their cowardice. And they try to book it for the nearest exit and run.
I would say that this is probably acting impulsively.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah,
act
it
impulsively,
sure is.
describe the emotion that drives you in answer one. The GM will tell you something you didn't notice until now as they answer the other. So, first of all, what's the emotion that's driving you right now?
Oh, absolutely fear and terror. Once again, Talon is trying to get herself out of a situation that she is in and is just straight up panicking.
I think that's very valid. Would you like to answer what advantage do you seize or what trouble hits you hard and fast?
I'll go with what trouble hits you hard and fast. And what I'm imagining is that it isn't even necessarily trouble that Musin directly causes. Like, it's not Musin grabbing Talon and stopping him. I think it's some of the people who are watching who see this as an opportunity to perhaps garner favor by making certain Talon does not reach the door. So I'm imagining that they are just tripped by someone and maybe even, caught and restrained so that they are not able to make their way out and instead can be presented to Musa.
Absolutely delightful. People start to grab you. They grab your shoulders and your arms and they start holding you still as people start to shout to allow Musin to advance. You hear something in your mind. You hear a voice that sounds like Colaris, but then morphs into Dietlan, and then morphs into a different voice. Something that you're not as familiar with. Someone whose voice echoes an experience or something from some kind of memory that you have, but you can't quite place. As they say, let him come. The advantage that you are seizing is a bit of guidance in this moment. What do you do?
Talon stops struggling, stops fighting, stops trying to escape. And they're not entirely sure what Musin would want. It's a little hard to gauge what a god of anger wants to see reflected back as a sign of subservience. And so Talon settles on keeping their chin up, their eyes focused on Musin, and tries not to show the fear that they are very clearly still feeling.
There's a hand on your arm that lets you go suddenly, and then another and another. And I don't know that Talon is paying attention to this, but the camera would see that people are almost unraveling physically. Their limbs are starting to unravel themselves. First comes off the skin, then the muscle and ligaments and tendons underneath until it is just bone. People are screaming and shrieking, and now they are backing up and giving you as much space as they have been giving Musin. Something is happening, and people are terrified of this as Musin continues to approach and smiles as much as a vulture can smile and looks down at you, stands up tall, bows out its chest and looks down at you and says, I didn't imagine the God-Killer would enter my domain. What do you do?
Helen attempts a bravado they're not certain they can accurately portray and says, I was just passing through.
That's so delightful. I did not expect that. I did not see that coming. You say, I was just passing through, and Musin laughs at that. You have not been gone from Angelfell very long. The fact that word of the God Killer has reached here either means that it is spreading very quickly or that this god knows something that it shouldn't. And you're not quite sure which one it is. But Musin laughs. Just passing through the domain of the god of anger and thinking you could go through unscathed?
Well, one can always hope, right?
Perhaps. And Musin leans in close and looks at you and says, There's more than one god on you right now. What is that?
If I'm being honest with you, I couldn't tell you. You might honestly know more than I do. I don't know a lot. Uh, I was just taking a trip.
Hmm. And Musin begins to circle you slowly, each step thundering, each step the talons scratching on the wood, carving into it a little bit. And Godkiller, where were you just passing through to? Where are you headed?
Mirrored City.
That is what I smell then. Leans in close and looks at you very closely. You have the favor of a god stronger than me. Then perhaps I shouldn't do anything here. And Musin takes a step back, an unexpected step back. And you hear people begin to whisper very quietly, as quiet as possible, but you can start to hear whispers of what is going on, what's happening, who is stronger than Musin. Everybody who exists in the domain of a single god and who is only used to that single god imagines their god the strongest. That's just the way that it is. The same way that you thought Kolaris was the strongest, or perhaps still do, even through that brief moment of fear that you saw in them. What do you do? As Musin takes a step back and people begin to whisper about what this means and what does the term God Killer mean.
Talon thinks about saying a few things, but especially with those whispers already starting after everything that has unfolded in this matter of a minute or less, rather than commenting on it, rather than acknowledging that it seems like perhaps Musin is going to just let them go without any further conflict, they take advantage of the opportunity and start making their way towards their bike if it is allowed.
You take a step. A very important question. Do you walk out backwards or are you turning your back on the God of Anger?
JD wants to say walking out backwards, but I don't think Talon has the experiential knowledge to even think about that. Like it is a bad choice, but they have never had a reason to think maybe you should just back out. So instead, yeah, 100% they turn their back on the god of anger.
these whispers are still happening. And now it's shock. Who would turn their back on Musin? Who would be stupid enough, or bold enough, or brave enough to do this? And as you're walking out, you hear Musin very quietly say, as quiet as a god can whisper, you can still hear it across the bar, but you hear Musin say, I hope this is the last time you cross my path, mortal. And then the screaming begins, as this god of anger cannot have people doubting his domain and his power. And you don't see this, but the camera pans back as Musin blindly reaches out, grabs a man by the throat, snaps his neck, and begins to devour him whole. And people start to run, and just as you have exited the bar, the wall that Musin destroyed comes back up. Easily, perfectly, as whole as it was before. And people are banging on the wall and screaming for help. Do you turn back?
Yes, Talon absolutely turns back. I would say even would take steps to go back inside.
You start to walk back toward it as this bloody scene through the windows you can see. People are screaming. There is blood being sprayed on the windows. You watch as somebody is scrambling at the windows and is dragged back by something in the darkness. You are the only person who stops to look at this, as everybody else on the street continues to walk. Because when the god of anger, if you're lucky enough to not have him looking at you, you don't risk his attention. And I think that that is where we will end tonight's episode. Thank you kindly, JD, um, for joining me on this little adventure into the city under the bridge. I'm so excited you took this route. I think it's a fascinating place that has been created. Um, I will turn it over to you for outros. Let us know who you are, where we can find you, plug anything that you would like to plug.
Yes, of course. So I am JD. I can be found everywhere on the internet these days, mostly Blue Sky, at JD Not Jason Dean. And for this upcoming week, tomorrow night, you can find me over with Live from the Apocalypse, where we will be recording our next episodes of our Masks actual play, Academy H. I will be back here on Entropy on Tuesday, running They Call Us Villains, our horror masks game, where the cast has just returned from a little adventure into TV land. And I'm sure it's going to be an easy transition back to being on the inpatient unit that they're all trapped on. So it's going to be a good time. On Wednesday, I'll be over with Guild Superior for our next episode of House of Eidolons. And then on Thursday, I will be running Redacted, a psychological horror game over on LFTA. And I'm pretty sure I have like 3 other things coming up next weekend, but I will not plug those right now. The best way you can find out where I'm going to be and what I'm going to be doing is on socials, where I will plug whatever I will be in on that given day.
Wonderful, thank you. And as mentioned at the top, my name is Kian. My pronouns are they, them. You can find me on Blue Sky at uptight chiffon. I'm going to plug the entropy stuff and I'm going to go through our channel schedule here because I'm in a lot of things here. First of all, Mondays, Follow the Ashen Throne, our political intrigue D&D 5e game, GM'd by Will. It's a delightful time. I got to take a man's head off, clean off his shoulders in an episode, and that was very satisfying to do. On Tuesdays, as JD said, They Call Us Villains, our horror masks actual play. I have not decapitated a man in that game, but the day is still young. Might be able to take care of
Yet.
that.
Yet.
It is an there's an opportunity that exists, and there's a specific man whose head I would like to take off. So we'll see if we can make that happen. On Thursdays, God Complex, a Girl by Moonlight actual play, also GM'd by Will. On Fridays, Weird Wilds War, a 5e actual play GM'd by JT. Every Saturday, except for the next couple of Saturdays. We are taking a couple Saturdays off, but we will be back here in about a month for GODKILLER Desecration, the third episode of that. And then keep an eye out. We do have the finale of Blooming in the Rot coming up. We had to reschedule that one, but our Invisible Sun actual play, we will have the finale in just a couple of weeks. That is all that I have. I forgot to look at where to raid, but I'm watching Transplaner right now and have been keeping an eye on their stuff. So we're going to send a raid over to Transplaner. Be sure to say hello. Be sure to type some messages in the chat to give them credit for the views. And other than that, be kind to yourselves, each other, and the planet. Take care of yourselves right now. It is a difficult time to exist and be an empathetic human, but we are so grateful that you're here. We're so grateful that you chose to spend some time with us tonight, and we will catch you on the next episode. See you next time.